Welcome everyone to the first of my conversations with colleagues. And I'd like to thank Andrew for joining me today. I first met Dr. Tressider at the Wounded Healer Conference in 2018. He's a fellow GP and practitioner health doctor. And we had a conversation about the Bach Flower Remedies. And I was very curious because he's got a great expertise in it. And I've used rescue remedies since I was about 15, probably doing my O-levels, and realized that it was a really good thing as a first aid for stress. But I really wasn't aware of all the other remedies available. So I was fascinated to talk to Andrew, and that's what I'd like to talk to him about today. So welcome, Andrew, and thank you for joining me. Tell me, how did you get drawn to the flower remedies in the first place?
Thank you, Jo. Interesting. I've always been lucky enough to grow up close to nature, but it was actually one of my patients that introduced me to them when I'd been a GP for a couple of years. I was already interested in certain aspects of complementary medicine, such as manipulation, such as osteopaths and chiropractors do, and I'd had my own health issues of fatigue after mumps, which left me with headaches. And as a result of that, I discovered something about food intolerances, and the headaches I was experiencing were related to certain foods. So my patients, over the next year or two, sort of really educated me about the whole range of complementary approaches that I hadn't learnt about at medical school. And there came a point when somebody very generously, after a kindness I'd given to their family, gave me a set of the flower essences and some literature. Like all presents, it sat on the shelf for about 3 or 4 months, and then you know how sometimes things happen in threes. I must have heard somebody say rescue remedy or something like that 2 or 3 times, and I got it out and read about them, and I was just fascinated, absolutely fascinated.
So did you start using them yourself at that point?
I did. I started using them on myself, and in the basic set that Dr. Bach discovered in the 1930s, there are 38, and each one, whether it's walnut or white chestnut or scleranthus or rock rose, each flower or tree helps retune us in a particular way. I think we've probably all had the experience that nature generally makes us feel calmer.
Yes.
And what Dr. Bach discovered was that specific flowers or trees seem to work on specific qualities of ours, whether it's confidence or whether it's courage or whether it's inner peace, and that when we go out of balance with those in lack of confidence or terror or mind going round and round and round, then we've gone out of tune from our potential. And that, as opposed to nature generally helping us with a general feeling, that actually specific flowers helped us with those specific issues. Really weird. He used himself as a laboratory. He used his own intuition to, as it were, monitor his own emotional state and find out what made it better.
That's fascinating. And if the public, if people who are not trained in this want to use them, I know that places like Neal's Yard have got combination remedies. How do they decide themselves which is the best one for them?
That's a really good question. So the first combination that most people have heard about, which has been around about 80 years or so, is rescue remedy. And that's a good one for shock, distress, upset, bad news, exam nerves, driving tests. And it helps retune us to calm. And there are other makers who make this very similar brands, very similar combinations. You're quite right that combinations are the way in. There are 38 remedies, and when I chose my first in the first place, I narrowed it down to 16. 3 days later, I'd narrowed it down to 12, but actually most of us only need fewer than that at a time. So choosing from ourselves from a large palette of colours, from a large repertoire of music is quite difficult. Whereas if there's a combination that says direction in life, or confidence, or cheer up, or that sort of phraseology, broadly speaking, those combinations contain flowers that don't work for everybody, but for a number of people, they will retune them on that level of emotion, that level of feeling.
Well, let's face it, the medication that we prescribe on those green prescription forms as doctors doesn't work for everyone. So I think, you know, it's fair to say that just because it doesn't work for anybody doesn't mean it doesn't have a value. Absolutely.
That's quite right, Jo. And I would certainly make the point at this juncture that using flower essences, they are tools for personal development, and they're tools for the normal person who's out of balance. They are not for any medical condition.
I like that, the way you phrase that, because so many people look to something for healing or a quick fix. But actually what we all need to be doing is looking at the self-development, the personal development, so that we include the exercise, the fresh air, the nutrition, hydration. I think perhaps where we are at the moment with lockdown and COVID has made people a little bit more aware of the importance of getting outdoors and the importance of exercise. And I know quite a number of people who are actually exercising more, getting outside more now than they did before lockdown, sort of ironically.
Yes.
So I think what was why I was very keen to talk to you today and to get the message out there is that there are a lot of tools in the toolkit that can help with self-development, and the flower essences certainly seem to be one of them.
That's right. And the experiences people have with them are very interesting. They come into three broad categories. Sometimes we have a dramatic, rapid result. One's distressed and one takes rescue remedy, for instance, or something like that, and one calms within minutes. And that's sometimes happens for an acute situation. And also small children often respond very rapidly. And interestingly, animals do as well. Which sort of negates the possibility that it could be a placebo effect. And then there are more gradual changes that we may notice. And then, of course, there may be people they don't work for, but then there are such gradual ones that that really we don't notice them at all, and we don't notice that it could have any relevance to or relation to the remedies we're taking. So to give an example, I saw a chap, I suppose about 20 years ago, and he came in with headaches, and the story was, I'm beating my head against a brick wall at work. And so I took the story about how much alcohol he was drinking, how much water he was drinking, too much tea and coffee and all those sort of things, and sleep, and gave him some advice. He didn't need medication. And I said, how about one of these Bach Flower Remedies? He said, oh, well, I don't know. I'll try one. I trust you, doctor. You know, we'll try it. And I gave him one or two which were about where am I going in life? And he came back 6 weeks later for something completely different. And I said, oh, by the way, how are your headaches? He said, oh, they're better. Absolutely fine. I said, and did you take the remedy? He said, yeah, I took it for a while. I said, what happened? Oh, it didn't make any difference. And I said, how's work? Oh, I've changed my job. So he'd had a complete change of circumstances because of an inner knowing that it was worth changing his job, and his headaches happened to have gone. I can't say what was cause and effect of the headaches, but it was interesting that the inner change, the change of affect, of feeling, had been so gradual and slow that his cognition, his thinking ability, had not actually noticed that the two were connected.
What's also very interesting is the language that he used. He had a headache from banging his head against a brick wall. Is it any wonder you get a headache if you're hitting your head against a wall? And that maybe if that wall was made of feathers or foam or air, he wouldn't have had the headache.
Yes, interesting.
Interesting language as well there.
It is indeed.
Yeah. So you recommend people take these long term if they want a change of direction, and how regularly do they need to be taking them?
So I think you can choose one for direction in life, and I think it's always good to recalibrate or to be certain about where we're going. We can choose to develop a quality such as confidence, a quality such as optimism, and I think if you choose a combination, it's worth going with it for 2 or 3 weeks. Sometimes the changes are more gradual and deeper after that time, but many of us have got layers of imbalance and sort of distress or crud or frustration, and you can deal with a layer over a week or two very often. It's said, Dr. Bach said, that many of us respond to particular flowers. So, as it were, there's one that always makes Jo better because it's the one that sort of makes her smile and wag her tail, and as opposed to a different one perhaps for me. And there are two that help me very often. So, whatever the circumstance, vervain, which is for excessive enthusiasm, just sort of slows me down and calms me down. And impatiens, which is for quick minds that are easily irritated by other people that are slow, just brings a patience and a tolerance. And those two always seem to pull me back into balance. So each of us will have a particular piece of music, as it were, that just makes us feel relaxed and makes our heart sing. So although there are 38 Bach Flower Remedies, people who are lucky enough to have a garden or be able to go to a park may find flowers that they're drawn to, or trees that they just like to be near or sit under, and who knows what invisible effects may be happening on a positive level.
Absolutely, absolutely. Fascinating. Thank you very much indeed, and I hope has given people something that they can go and look into further. So these are the Bach, that's spelled B-A-C-H, Flower Remedies, and there is information online, and there are a number of companies that are making them. But thank you very much for your expertise today, Andrew. That's been really interesting.
Thank you, Jo, for asking me.